Hello, everyone. The following talk is based on joint work by Daniel Mersch, Ofer Feinerman, and myself from the Department of Physics of Complex Systems in the Weizmann Institute of Science.
Although most cells in multicellular organisms have similar properties one can also find in single-celled organisms, during evolution, many parts of the multicellular organisms have become specialized in ways that make sense only at the level of the whole organism. Being iconed as superorganisms, we can expect to find similar phenomena in social insects, and especially in ant colonies, as we do indeed. Here, for an example, we see some of the complex structures that the tropical weaver ants create during their nest construction out of leaves. In this talk, I would like to show yet another such an example that we discovered during our studies of cooperative transport by the longhorn crazy ant. These ants are extremely good at this behavior. They can solve, as a group, non-trivial navigational problems, even when the vast majority of the individual ants have the wrong knowledge. One day, as I was watching a group of ants performing cooperative transport of a dead mantis on a floor full of small obstacles, I noticed that some of the ants show interesting behavior. These ants cleared small stones out of the way. It really looked as if the ants understood what was going on and what they needed to do in order to help the group of transporters in their task by removing small obstacles out of the way. At first, I thought that these ants just confused the small stones with food. But then I noticed several important differences between food retrieval and clearing behavior. First, clearing can be executed to any direction and not just towards the nest. Second, clearing is usually executed for short distances and not all the way to the nest. It could be located several meters away. And finally, in cooperative transport, these ants quickly occupy the load from all around. However, clearing obstacles was always executed by a single ant. In this extreme example, a single ant cleared out of the way a large piece of glass that would have been carried by at least 10 ants if it was a real food. Although the function of clearing obstacles during cooperative transport seemed to be obvious, we still tested whether clearing behavior does help with the transport by devising an experimental setup with 4 consecutive corridors that were filled with colored beads. Effectively, the ants could not transport the food load out of the confined area as long as the corridors were full. Once the ants brought their load near the corridor, other ants started clearing the beads. The ants were highly efficient, clearing a free path in the nest direction. The ants repeated this performance each time, concentrating their effort just in front of the carried load, where clearing was most needed. In order to figure out the mechanism of the clearing behavior, we examined the overall dynamics of cooperative transport in an arena full of small obstacles. In the following ethogram, each bar represents the sequence of behaviors presented by a single ant, ordered by their arrival time to an experimental setup where a food load was positioned in an arena full of beads. Following recruitment by laying pheromone marks in green from the food and towards the nest, more and more ants arrived to the load area. After a while, some ants start clearing beads. After a careful examination of the bead clearing events in this context, we noticed that just before the future clearer made a decision to grab a bead, a passing by recruiter ant deposited a pheromone mark just a few millimeters away from either the bead position or the future clearing ant. The correlation between the presence of a nearby pheromone mark and the decision to clear an adjacent bead is overwhelming. Once an ant cleared a bead, about half of these ants continued to clear more beads. In such cases, subsequent clearing events were not associated with nearby pheromone marks. This means that these ants, after triggered by the pheromone, adopted clearing behavior as a continuous task. In an extreme case, a single ant repeatedly cleared more than 50 beads in a row. This is a true serial clearer. In this figure, each line represents a clearing event connecting the original bead position, a small dot, to the final position where the bead was dropped, large dot. For clarity, all clearing events by a certain ant are marked in the same color. It seems that the different ants have individual preference of a clearing sector. However, all ants tend to clear the beads from relatively short distance, from near the food load and away of it. Taken all together, the overall distribution of about 300 clearing events relative to the load position reveal that on the left, most beads are cleared right in front of the carried load, in the nest direction, and on the right, that the beads are dropped more to the sides, thus ease the transport of the load to the nest. Being tramp ants that inhabit available cracks and cavities, the crazy ants do not display clearing behavior in any other context, such as digging in the ground or making nest maintenance. So it was interesting to check how much these ants are sensitive to the specific context of cooperative transport. In order to test this, we gave the ants either a single large load that requires cooperative transport, or a pile of crumbs of the same food, where the ants can carry individually, one by one. To our surprise, these ants indeed respond with clearing behavior only to the large load that requires cooperative transport, when clearing obstacles is needed the most. Although it is very tempting to attribute the ants with high level of awareness and understanding of the situation, I recall Morgan's canon, which says, in no case is an animal activity to be interpreted in terms of higher psychological processes if it can be fairly interpreted in terms of processes which stand lower in the scale of psychological evolution and development. A possible explanation to this context-dependent behavior could be, for example, simply because when ants carry small food crumbs, less ants perform recruitment by laying pheromone marks. Counting the number of ants recruited to the experimental area support this explanation. To summarize, we report of a new behavior, collective obstacle clearing during cooperative transport by ants. Surprisingly, the ants use the existing mass recruitment mechanism in order to elicit context-specific and continuous and highly efficient clearing obstacle behavior that help the transporter ants with their hard mission of carrying a large load back to their nest in an area full of obstacles. This is another demonstration of the clever collective behavior at the scale of the group. Thank you for listening.